Hello, and welcome one and all to the Mega Movie Podcast, part of the Extremed podcast network from Extreme Improv. So, hello everyone. Before we get on to today's subject, which is the rumoured Harry Potter series that will be perhaps in development from Warner Brothers for HBO Max, I just want to take a moment to say, if you haven't done so already, smash that subscribe button over on youtube.com/Extreme Improv if you're watching the video version, or click the subscribe button on whichever platform you're listening to this to. If you have the audio podcast version for Spotify, Google Podcasts, Apple Podcasts, or anywhere else. And now we're past that, let's get straight into the Wizarding world. So it's been reported, we've seen reports this week, I've seen stuff on Cinema Blend, I've seen stuff on Dark Horizons, I've seen stuff all over the place where people are discussing the possibility that HBO Max, this streaming service which has created a lot of waves over the last few months, may be in the early stages of developing a Harry Potter TV show. To me, this makes perfect sense. Harry Potter is going to be by far the biggest thing they have, because you think about it, they have Harry Potter studios. You can go in London, well, just outside London, but you can go to the Harry Potter studio tour and you walk around the entire place. It's like Harry Potter Land. They have at Universal Studios a huge area dedicated to Harry Potter. They don't have that for DC, they don't have that for Superman. And it's not to say that Superman and things aren't as big, but it just shows how big Harry Potter is. The fact that they will build whole theme parks and tourist places just around Harry Potter. Now, Harry Potter was originally obviously 7 books. It then became 8 films, which has had 2 spin-off films with another currently shooting, and I think that's going to be 5-film series overall in the Fantastic Beasts. But they even say it's the Wizarding World rather than just Harry Potter. It's the Wizarding World, and it's expanding, and it's going to continue expanding. It obviously also had the stage play, which isn't just one play, it's 2 plays. It's a play spread over 2 nights. You actually have to go back to the theatre 2 nights in a row to be able to see the full story. So, does it make sense for them to do this? Yes, it is their biggest property. Warner Brothers want to make HBO Max the next Disney Plus, or the next Netflix, or the next Amazon Prime, I guess. And it's such an interesting subject when you see how these things have developed, because obviously there was VHS versus Betamax many years ago. Then there was DVDs came in, and when DVDs came in, they became the big thing. Along the way, we had video CDs or Laserdisc, but these had never taken off. Then with Blu-ray had HD DVD to compete against, and Blu-ray won out, but it never fully replaced DVDs. You go into any shops, or if you shop online now, you can get the latest films, and they will still be available on DVD, even though I think it came out in the very late 90s or very early noughties, when everyone started getting DVDs. And it's still a relevant platform. So, when it then came to replacing Blu-rays, because they'd never fully taken over from DVDs anyway, we started getting streaming services. Now, obviously, in between that, the equivalent, I guess, to Laserdisc was that you could get digital downloads, but whilst you can still buy a movie outright and download something, even if you buy something now, you're still kind of streaming it. And so there was Netflix, and Netflix would show everything from Warner Brothers, they'd show it from Disney, they'd show it from any of these studios, Paramount Pictures, and they'd just get the rights to everything. Then Amazon came along and they were doing the same, and you started getting you started getting like original programming and original films, and things like Stranger Things or House of Cards was like, this is only from Netflix. And Vikings, I guess, and whatever else, Bosch, were on Amazon. And then obviously Disney Plus happened, and that really changed a lot, because Disney said, well, look, we already own a load of films. We're just going to put them on our service and we're going to take them off of yours. And because of this happening, Netflix were like, well, in the case of the Marvel series, it's like, well, we're not going to continue making Marvel series because you're not going to give us the Marvel films, and these are just going to be that we're promoting you more than you're giving us anything really valuable. So there was suddenly, the battle lines had been drawn. There was suddenly a war. A war was emerging. And all of the streaming platforms suddenly started looking at, right, what can we have as our original content? Now, I would say Netflix. The things that jumped to my head, obviously, is Stranger Things. Maybe something like Bird Box was a film that was a big thing. Bright was a film. I'm trying to think what the other series are. There isn't terribly much that's actually completely captured my attention. The Boys, obviously, on Amazon Prime is a big thing over there. But Netflix and Amazon Prime, as much as they try to bolster up what their libraries are with original content, so much I think that comes out on Netflix as original Netflix stuff just feels like they're just bolstering their library. It doesn't feel like it's blockbuster or groundbreaking. There's a few projects with Adam Sandler, I guess I don't think I watched any of them, but they're trying to suddenly catch up to 100 years of Disney and 80 years of Warner Brothers and stuff like this. And it was just that when Disney suddenly said, well, we have all these films, all of the other companies, like I've just heard this week, the WWE Network is being folded into Peacock streaming service, NBC, and I don't even know, I didn't even have that on my radar before this last week. But Warner Brothers obviously said, well, we have an awful lot of films as well. So if you take all of the Disney films, and now with Fox being owned by Disney, all of the Fox films, and put them onto Disney Plus, and if you take all of the Warner Brothers films and put them onto HBO Max, then it means that something like Netflix or Amazon suddenly is going to be struggling a bit more, because there's going to be huge libraries of famous IP which they don't have on their streaming services. So, for Netflix and Amazon Prime, they are going to have to develop new things, make deals where they can, but they won't, like, remember a couple of years ago, like, Netflix was suddenly like, oh, we've got the Cloverfield paradox. It's like, well, you got it because whatever studio had it at the time kind of abandoned it because it wasn't very good. So, studios are still clearly scrambling to make sure that they've got exclusive content. But that's where we come back to HBO, Warner Brothers, and Harry Potter. Warner Brothers own the DC universe, so when they announced that the Snyder Cut was going to be a big thing on HBO Max, that made sense. Like they had a film there, which with the director's cuts version, they could have like a 4-hour mini-series. It's like, well, that's going to get people to definitely buy our service that week. HBO Max announced that in 2021, in a response to the pandemic, we're going to have all of our big movies releasing exclusively or day and date with the cinema on HBO Max. And that upset a lot of people, ruffled the feathers. Suddenly, other companies were saying, hang on, but we've got international rights to Dune or Godzilla versus Kong or whatever. And it caused a lot of friction in the industry, and what does it mean for the place of cinema? And maybe they knew it would cause this friction, but it also got everyone talking about HBO Max. And obviously, the people at Warner Brothers looked at their catalogue. What do we own? Okay, we have the exclusive rights to 8 Harry Potter films on this service, and we have 2 Fantastic Beast films. Now, I'm still surprised at some point they're not going to try and bring the band back together and have The Cursed Child, Harry Potter and the Cursed Child, adapted back into a film. And it could be a completely new take on it, because I won't say spoilers for that show, so don't worry if you've not seen it at the theatre, because I know it's still impossible to get. Well, it's incredibly impossible to get tickets at the moment because of the pandemic. But I saw it about a year and a half ago, and it was difficult to get those tickets. You had to get them many months in advance. But when I watched that, lots of people just read the book, like it's a script. It doesn't have all of the detail that the novels would have because it's designed as a script. And people read it and it's like, oh, I don't think it's that good. You see it on stage and then it makes so much more sense, because that whole experience is based around what can we actually do that is magic on stage? How can we achieve the illusion of performing magic and wizards on stage? And that is what so much of what that show is based around. And I won't say any spoilers on that. So if they did suddenly decide, okay, Daniel Radcliffe and Emma Watson and Rupert Grint, they're all 10 years older than they were when the last Harry Potter films were made, and realistically they were already 2 or 3 years older than what their characters were by the time the last films came out. So that's about 13 years. The book is set 19 years later for the end of Harry Potter, like the final book, set 19 years later. This could be the chance for them to say, well, look, they're all adults, they look like adults, they're not going to change their appearance much in the next 5 years. Let's actually make the Cursed Child. And they could do that. And I think it'd be very exciting if they did do that. It would be like Harry Potter: The Next Generation. And clearly J.K. Rowling isn't against expanding the Harry Potter world. It seemed for so long that these 7 books were like untouchable, that these were the stories. But then she started doing Pottermore, the website, which gave more Harry Potter, like more tales, more little bits of writing. And then obviously the Fantastic Beast films she wrote, and then there's just more and more that's expanded that world, and it has become a Lord of the Rings, Middle-earth style expansive universe. And I think probably she's happy to continue to see it go that way. And so Warner Brothers saying, well, what if we had a TV series? What would that be? What would a Harry Potter TV series be? It's interesting because the films make them so much money. The fact that you've got this studio tour where you go around and it is literally the films. It's things based on the actors and based on the making of those films. It's not just generic Harry Potter world. I don't think they're just going to remake the films. I don't think they're going to remake the books. And it'd probably be a mistake to do so, because even though they've recast the actors in the stage show, because obviously they're not going to have the original film cast play their characters on stage for 2 years, 3 years in a row. I don't think they want to recast, and everyone identifies Daniel Radcliffe is Harry Potter. It doesn't matter what else he plays, he's still Harry Potter. One of the unfortunate things about typecasting in that sense, and he has had a very successful career with other things, but obviously nothing's even come 10% as close to the level of fame or success that he got for Harry Potter. And it would just be interesting to see if they did at some point attempt to recreate those characters, to retell those stories, and eventually they will. But I think eventually they will is going to be in at least another 10 years' time. Because the actors were young, they were children when they played these parts, because there is the potential to do follow-up films with the actors still as these characters, telling new stories. I think that's what their focus will be on, whilst they're still just getting... Because the films still look good. If you watch the first 2 Harry Potter films, and especially the first one, the visual look doesn't match what came later. The CGI doesn't live up, in the first one in particular, to what they achieved from the third film onwards. But that doesn't really matter, because for so many children watching it and for so many adults who are now beginning to be nostalgic about it, they can still really, really enjoy what those films were. It's 2021, which means it's going to be the 20-year anniversary of when the first Harry Potter film came out. And isn't that insane? 20-year anniversary. But at what stage is a 20-year anniversary when the actors are probably now in their early to mid-30s? Is that too... or they might even still be in their 20s when I think about it. Is that too soon to remake them? Potentially, just because they might be cutting their own throat a little bit, and it's not the same as, right, we're going to have a new Spider-Man every 3 years, we're going to recast Doctor Who with a new actor every 3 years and tell new stories. This would have to be something where they're absolutely decidedly making this something new. And if they were to retell Harry Potter as a TV show rather than a film, have they downgraded it a little? The downside is that they probably wouldn't put the same budget into a TV show as they would a film. So it would mean that if they retold the same things they've already done on film, it probably would seem not as good on a TV show. Even if like CGI is better or whatever, it probably just couldn't have the same scale that they were going for with the films. The plus side is that they would be able to take... It's so like the formula is easy. A year at Hogwarts equals season 1. The next year at Hogwarts is season 2. A Christmas special, what happens when Harry goes home with the Dursleys. There's so much that you could explore. I think just because of the nature of the original works, unlike something like The Walking Dead or Game of Thrones, they probably would have to decide, look, we're not going to remix things and purposely stray off the plot. We're not going to purposely just do a huge twist where Hermione is the bad guy or something like this. They'd probably have to keep things faithful, in which case they'd just be repeating what they did in the films. And obviously the films did play around with things from the books a little bit, but that was mostly in the interest of condensing a year's worth of adventures for when Harry, Hermione and Ron were at Hogwarts into just like a 2.5 hour film. And perhaps it would be that in a TV show, some of these things where there was cut characters or rushed sequences, they could explore them more and tell them more faithfully and fully to what happened in the books. That would be a benefit. But I think it's too soon. What I think is more likely to happen is we're going to go forward at least another 10 years. And I'm very happy to have egg on my face, and I'll admit I'm wrong if this happens sooner. And it could even be that they suddenly announce this series as a remake. But I think it's going to be 10 more years, and then we are making a new series of Harry Potter films. And we're retelling the story. But because it's not just retelling a story, it's retelling 7 books, which as itself was already created and split up into 8 books. And to do all of that again, what was if they say, right, we're going to remake it, and then the first one isn't well received? Do they suddenly stop? They might suddenly damage the legacy of what they've already created. This could end up like Back to the Future, where they decide we're never going to remake this, we're never going to revisit this, because otherwise it could damage the legacy of something which is so cherished by so many. But let's assume that they're now not going to retell the stories. What would a Harry Potter TV show be? Well, I think it would be a Wizarding World TV series. We hear, because there's so many... Lord of the Rings, the movies, came out in 2001. Harry Potter came out in 2001. There's similarities in that they're both based around fantasy and wizards. And they've got these ever-expanding worlds. Harry Potter at the time of the original films didn't have an expanding world yet, because the books weren't even out. The original stories, we knew there'd be 7 books, and they weren't all out yet when the films began. Obviously, everything that was possible to come from the Middle-earth saga had already come out. Christopher Walken. Christopher Tolkien has obviously continued to write, release, and compile together things that his father had worked on, J.R.R. Tolkien. But for most people, we understand that, okay, other than just patching up and putting out things that hadn't quite been finished or developed, J.R.R. Tolkien is long since no longer with us, and that story is told. But there was a huge, expansive universe there. And so it means that along the way, we could say, well, there's all the appendices and things that we can dive into because we've got the rights to the Lord of the Rings, and eventually we then did get the Hobbit films, which people said at the time, how can this be 2 films that last 2.5, 3 hours each when it was one short book for children? And it ended up becoming 3 3-hour films, or 3 4-hour films, whatever it became in the end. And it's just like, they'll find a way, and obviously along the way, it's like we're never selling the rights to Silmarillion because we didn't like what happened with the films. We're not happy with the studio. We don't feel that the films reflected the original writing. And that's from Christopher Tolkien, who I think everyone thinks is just a bit salty that the rights were sold and he only continued to get so much money, or it was like, well, we didn't know there would be video games when these rights were sold, and you're not giving us anything for the video games. I think a lot of that's been resolved now, hence why we're going to get the Amazon series based on Lord of the Rings. Now, how much that actually ties into the Lord of the Rings films and the Hobbit films is unknown. Obviously, with the Hobbit, that was a continuation, still directed by Peter Jackson, even though it wasn't originally going to be directed by Peter Jackson, but it was going to have like a direct connective continuation of his series. But then it became a 100% connected continuation of his series after Guillermo del Toro, who was going to direct it, because of the delays, didn't end up directing it, and Peter Jackson continued it. Will this completely follow on with the visual design and story as established, and the canon as established in the Lord of the Rings trilogy and the Hobbit trilogy? Who knows, because that's still a little bit of a mystery. We do know that the Fantastic Beasts films do continue on as a direct continuation of the Warner Brothers produced Harry Potter films. It's the Wizarding World, even though that we're like, oh, how is McGonagall at Hogwarts in Fantastic Beasts 2? She shouldn't be born yet, or she shouldn't be that old, or whatever. And that's an error, but it's still a continuation of the series. So you have to believe that even though there are things which says, oh well, the cursed child is a continuation of the books, not necessarily the films. That's interesting because it's never quite been clarified to the best of my knowledge. Would the TV series, if it's released by HBO Max, then it's made by Warner Brothers, and you've got to believe it absolutely would be a continuation of the Harry Potter and Fantastic Beasts film series. Does it have to be based around Harry Potter? No. Could it just be set at Hogwarts and it's set in the modern time? Could it be that it's set in the modern time and Daniel Radcliffe is in it and he's just playing Professor Harry Potter? Or actually, I don't think... Is Harry... I'm trying to think without giving spoilers for what happens at the end of the book or in The Cursed Child. Perhaps, no, I think he works for the Ministry of Magic. I don't want to give spoilers away. But so if there's like Professor Longbottom or whoever you've got there that works at the school, could that character come back and still be the same actor as in the film series? I forget the name who played Neville Longbottom. Potentially. Or could it just be like Fantastic Beasts, where it will have things that connect to Harry Potter and Hogwarts, but it's actually just set somewhere else. Just as Fantastic Beasts is about Newt, who went to Hogwarts and knows Albus Dumbledore, but it was the first one at least was set in New York, and it's going to follow a different set of characters set within the Wizarding World. I think that's far more likely, just to expand the universe, to give us new characters, because again, this is a merchandise machine, and if they come up with a whole new set of characters, they can sell a whole new set of wands, a whole new set of action figures, and they can sell it at a different school, which means that they've got different school houses. So it wouldn't just be Slytherin, Hufflepuff, Ravenclaw and Gryffindor. It might be whatever other things, which means they can sell new scarves. It's just a gold mine waiting to happen. And I think also not telling the same stories as was told in Harry Potter films means that they won't have the risk that, oh well, we have to do this lower budget or stretch the budget beyond our means to do things that we'd done previously in a feature film, now for a TV series. It would be the similar approach to when they made The Cursed Child, where they can say, look, we're writing The Cursed Child, we can't make this the same as what you see on a Harry Potter film, so we're going to write everything around what is achievable on stage. In that same sense, they could say, okay, we're not making a film and we're not making a play. What will our budget allow us to do in terms of wizardry and magic on a TV series? And so does that mean that there is less Quidditch? Does it mean that there's less lightning effects and explosions and transfigurations and all this stuff? Maybe. But it also means they'd be able to plot out season arcs based around, okay, this story needs to be paced out over 10 episodes or something like this. or it needs to cover a year at Hogwarts, and how can the mystery unfold? Because you think even writing the original novels, they may have been set over a year of Hogwarts, but you can easily have a time jump of saying, chapter 12, it is now the winter. And you can do that, and you can skip from autumn to winter just from one page to the next. On a TV show, you can't really just skip forward months at a time without there being some reason for it, because it would be jarring, it would be weird. So you can usually pass a few days at a time, or it's been a couple of weeks since something happened and people don't even think about those time jumps. But if you do too big a time jump in a TV show, it's like, what? So hang on, why is it suddenly, oh, it's coming up to prom, or it's coming up to the end of the school year? There would be things that make it seem like this school year has passed really quickly, and you'd need to plot out and pace out and make sure the audience is clued in to how time is progressing with the year of Hogwarts. You know, what exams are coming up, what events are coming up, when is it going to be the Christmas party in the summer, and all this sort of thing. And if you release it on Netflix, for example, which they won't because it's HBO Max, if they dropped it all at once, then that is relevant, because in a TV show, they might have a Christmas-themed episode paced to come out just before Christmas. It would be weird for them to do a Christmas-themed episode if you're not going to see it until March. If you're dropping it all on one day, then it's like, well, do we just never show Christmas, or is Christmas a part of this? But if it's HBO Max, which, if we're to understand things like with Justice League, even though that now may just be one movie, is it going to be a case of this is coming out weekly? Is it going to be a case of, well, the first 2 episodes are going to come out like WandaVision did on Disney Plus, and then the rest of the episodes are going to come out week after week? And that's what Amazon did with The Boys. The first series, I believe, dropped all at once. The second series, it was like, here's 2 or 3 episodes, and now the next episode's going to be next week. And it's because it's important, and this is something where Netflix found great success with just saying, you can binge watch this whole series, get everyone talking about it, and it will spread through like wildfire because it gets people hooked. Everyone will talk, the next people will start to watch, get everyone hooked, and it will be a ripple effect where over a 2-3 week period, most people feel like, oh, I need to see this. Whereas perhaps Amazon or Disney or HBO Max have looked at things and said, yeah, but then they stop talking about it straight away, and it doesn't give reason for people to keep subscribing unless we've got another series ready. And it's a bit different, and even if Netflix started now, where they can't get the deals with Disney and Warner Brothers anymore, whereas at the beginning they might have been like, well, we'll just drop whole series and people like to binge watch the whole series, because we can get series and shows and TV shows and movies from everyone. They can't do that now, so maybe in time Netflix may change their policy. Or is it too late for them to change up how they do things? Other streaming services can be like, okay, so if we get, so say Justice League, the Snyder Cut, you watch that 4 weeks in a row, and you're like, well, I only needed to buy this service for a month. But you're like, but next week the Harry Potter series begins. Okay, I just need to buy it for a second month. And, this is 12 episodes long, which means I need to buy it for a third month and a fourth month. Oh no, they've said there's an extra 13th episode, which means that my subscription will end after episode 12. I better buy it for one more month. And that's the logic. That way it keeps people engaged with the service. I would love to see a Harry Potter TV show, because I think it would be something, there would be no expense spared. It would be like a super high quality production. The writing would be worked on. It wouldn't just be like a quick adaptation, like to cash in. It would be something where they probably get big actors to play important roles, and then probably, like the same approach as Harry Potter, they'd get some young actors to play children characters and stuff, if it is indeed set at school, or if it's alternatively set around older people, like how Newt is like a grown adult by the time of the events of Fantastic Beasts. But either way, let us know what you think. We're going to follow this story more, and we're going to have lots of stuff coming up. I can't stress enough, I'm chomping at the bit. We've got like a big announcement from Extreme Improv coming up soon. So this is obviously the Mega Movie podcast, and we say it's part of the Extreme Improv Extremed podcast network. But there's loads of other podcasts that we've currently got, including the Games Monster podcast, several about improv comedy, and then we've got ones about travel and professional wrestling. There's loads of stuff. We've got our weekly streaming show, Extreme Improv Extremed, which is every Wednesday and Thursday at 8:30pm UK time, every Friday at 12pm UK time for the matinee show, and then we have the Revenge of the Mafia, or Revenge of the Werewolf, which is a murder mystery interactive show every Friday at 8pm UK time. But we're going to have loads of stuff coming up very soon. So if you want to support what we do here, if you want to support the channel or the page or whatever, just go to facebook.com/Extreme Improv, give us a like. Go to youtube.com/Extreme Improv and smash that subscribe button. And until next time, stay safe and always stay extremed. My name is David Postansky, and we'll see you again soon.